Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hockey Writers Ice Time, where we dive into some of the big ideas around the NHL. I'm Mike Fink. I'm not in my usual setting. I'm actually on the road. I'm in Hershey, but after covering the game, but we're covering the Stanley Cup Playoffs. We're still chugging along. I'm joined by Alex Chauvancy, who's been on a few times. Alex, how are you doing?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Just coming back from game one of Hershey versus Lehigh Valley, Calder Cup playoffs. A lot of fun stuff there, but we're not talking about the AHL now. We're going to be talking about the Stanley Cup playoffs, which the first round is kind of wrapping up. It's sort of, we're in that part where we finally are starting to see how some series are playing out. A lot of game six matchups are coming up tonight, and then there's going to be some possible game sevens, maybe over this weekend. But we are at that point where a few of them have already wrapped up. So I think what's interesting about the way we cover the playoffs and the way we look at some of these teams is that there's this glass half empty or glass half full feel to the playoffs. It's hard to know whether you should label it as from a negative standpoint of this team fell apart, this team's awful, this team's collapsing, or this team's really doing well and taking over this series. So I'll actually start with this, which is which teams, because there are some series that have flipped, like where one team has taken over the series and won the series basically, or controlled the series for that matter. So I'll ask you from that perspective. We'll be a little optimistic to start it, which I think might be against my DNA, again, maybe against your DNA as a little as well, but we'll try to be positive first and say which team, I'll ask you, which team has taken over their series or is having the best comeback in the series so far. You have a few teams to choose from, a few teams that have won back-to-back games or have really taken over a series of a strong game five or a game four. So I'll ask you which team comes to mind.
For me, it's got to be the Edmonton Oilers. Just the way that series started, it kind of looked like the Kings had it in control after going up 2-0, and then there was that challenge by Jim Hiller in Game 3. And ever since then, it's been all Oilers. And just the way the Oilers played in Game 5, they pretty much dominated the Kings too. So I'm not really sure I see the Kings coming back from that. And I thought the Oilers were kind of dead in the water at that point, but it looks like they have a firm grasp on the series at this point. And I think Game 6 is in Edmonton, right? So I probably look for them to close out that series pretty quickly.
It's game six in Edmonton. Game seven is back in LA, but I don't know if the Oilers are losing two games in the next three. In the next two games, it's just hard seeing them losing one, and that's the series that I think really comes to mind, where you can look at that and say the Kings collapsed. The Kings did their thing again, where they played the Oilers. They had the series locked up, 2-0 series lead. They were playing. They controlled the series. There's no other way around it, and it's that challenge, which I guess will. Is like you could say that's the turning point, but it's not just the challenge that game four they let go, but at the same time, this is the Oilers taking over the series. I think that as much as we can label the Kings as collapsing here, the Oilers. It's when your star players are playing well, and when your depth starts coming together like it has. It just those two pieces when you put that together, and their defense is pieced it together. It's not great. It's had its issues. Evan Bouchard, we talked enough about him and his defensive issues, but they've put it together and they've controlled the series. Do I think that this team can win the cup still? I still have my concerns about that. In the big picture, there's still the issues. But right now, they've taken over this series. One team that I think of and similar out west is I think Vegas is the same sort of thing, where as much as the Wild have this reputation of falling apart in the playoffs, it's been a decade since they've won a playoff series, which is crazy to think about. And it's one of those teams that, as a franchise, you're always like, oh, this franchise is cursed. They can't win. And it's easy to label them as the team that collapsed. Vegas has taken over this series, back-to-back overtime win, and their star players are stepping up. You have Jack Eichel, who's played well recently. Mark Stone, I think, had a goal. Brett Howden's having quietly a great series. I think it's 3 goals, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll actually ask you about Vegas, that series, do you see them as the team that really took over this series? And with that in mind, do you see them as the team that now can go on a run in the West, or maybe you want to pump the brakes on them a bit, but what you think of Vegas so far early on?
Yeah, I had Vegas as one of my cup contenders in the West. They had a really good close to the regular season as well. So I was actually a little surprised they went down in that series to begin. They've gotten lucky with a couple of overtime wins. But that's just how the playoffs go sometimes. But yeah, I really like that team, just their composition with Ivan Barbashev, Jack Eichel, guys like that in the top six. They have a really good team. Mark Stone, obviously. So I was a little surprised they went down because I didn't really like the Wild coming into the playoffs, but that top line with Matt Boldy and Kirill Kaprizov has done really, really well for them. Losing the last couple of games in the fashion that they have, I think that'll be tough for them to come back from, but we'll see. But yeah, I like Vegas. I think they were one of my teams that I could see making a run in the West, and I think they'll probably close the series out now that they've kind of taken a stranglehold on it, and just the way they've won the games. I have to imagine that'd be a little demoralizing for Minnesota as well. So I like Vegas to kind of close this one out as well.
You talk about the luck, the challenge at the end of Game 5 that that took away a goal from Minnesota, and
right,
when the game went to overtime. It's sometimes it's those moments where you feel like, as a franchise from Minnesota or any franchise that has the series of losing in the playoffs or have coming short in the playoffs, you point to moments like that and you're saying, like, that's just bad luck that we can't explain. And it's always those people who put on the tinfoil hats and say, like, okay, there's something behind that. Like, they want the Wild to lose. But yeah, the Golden Knights and the Oilers are kind of in the same boat, where they have all the momentum. They're heading into Game 6, and even if they lose Game 6, it's hard seeing them losing back-to-back games. Again, I mean, especially since they've looked like a better team lately, and it's those two. I mean, there's other teams that you could say taken over their series. Maybe Dallas has taken over theirs with just a great Game 5. They're heading into Game 6 tonight. We're recording this on Thursday morning, so maybe by the time you watch this, they'll have already played. But it's these matchups where they've controlled the series, they've taken over the series more than I think the other team has collapsed. On the other side of things, which team? I mean, there's really only one correct answer, but which team? I'm like, which team are we going to say collapse? As much as I want to say the other team in this series has stepped up and taken over the series, no, it's really which team has collapsed and which team, or can we just say, like, yeah, they are falling apart. They are falling apart and they're losing this series. I think there's only one answer. So I guess you could just tell me what you think about this one team that had the series locked up and it was theirs to lose, and it's been theirs to lose the whole time, and now they are losing it as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be the Toronto Maple Leafs, right?
Yeah.
They won before the Ottawa Senators won a couple of games. They had gone into overtime, like 3 times, I think. So the Maple Leafs did get lucky in that sense. They kind of just won a couple of coin flip games, and once Ottawa got that one coin flip game to them, I think it gave them a little bit of confidence. And I don't think losing Game 5 was necessarily or Game 4 was necessarily gonna like shock the Leafs because they still had a 3-1 series lead. But the way they lost Game 5 4-0, and just their history, I'm sure it's in their heads a little bit at this point that, it's like, oh no, this is happening again. If they lose Game 6, I just can't really see them winning Game 7. I think Ottawa will probably take the series in that point, which would be kind of crazy. But yeah, I mean, it's the Maple Leafs. That's the only answer here. They kind of have to get it done tonight in Game 6, or otherwise I think all the pressure is going to be on them in Game 7. I don't think Ottawa will be – I think they're already playing a lot looser than they were earlier in the series, and I think they got to – just as long as they keep their discipline in check, because that's been an issue for them in this series, they have a chance of coming back and winning it in 7 games. But, yeah, the Maple Leafs are the obvious answer here. It's kind of crazy. You wouldn't think it's happening to them again, but it is. So that's why Game 5 or Game 6 is so important for them. They got to win it.
I didn't think it would happen in a reverse sweep either. It's been 11 years since our last reverse sweep, and there's only been 4 in the playoffs. But it's happening again. They had a 3-0 series lead. I want to give Ottawa credit because, to their credit, their stars are stepping up now. Their star players are taking over this year. Brady Tkachuk's having a great series. Jake Sanderson and Thomas Chabot both are playing well on both ends of the ice. They've contributed goals as well. And the big one for them is Linus Ullmark. He's found his footing lately. Game 4 was not his best game. I think he allowed 3 goals, but he faced, I think, 34 shots. So the Maple Leafs were pressing, and he didn't shut the door down, but he had a few big saves there in that game. And Game 5, he had his best game. It was like a 29 save shot where he's finding his footing now. And if you have an elite goaltender who can get hot like this, that is something to be concerned about. I mean, for Ottawa, when you look at the big picture, that's a team you could be excited about going on a run because of those pieces. I mean, if they win their series, they'll face Florida. I don't think there will be anybody left by Game 4 of that series just because of the 2 teams involved. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but it's the big picture's Maple Leafs. They are collapsing again, and it's really Game 5. Game 5 is the one that they needed to win, and that was the one. You win on your home. It's Game 4. You could write off. Okay, you're on the road. You're not going to beat the Senators 4 times in a row. It's hard to sweep anyone in hockey, and it's hard to sweep a Senators team that is a good hockey team. They were good, and they were playing close to start. But now it's Game 5. They fall apart, and it's a mix of both, because I think in the first 3 games you saw depth skaters scoring the big goals when needed. Like Max Domi scored an overtime winner. Simone Benoit, go figure, scored an overtime winning goal. But the other part is the star power. Like their star power, they carried them through the first 3 games, the first 4 games for that matter, and they're just falling apart. And again, it's those core 4 players. I mean, I'll ask you this: like, who would you blame for it? Is it them again? Is it those 4 players? It's like, yeah, they need it. They need to close out the series. This is in these big moments, you can't disappear from the spotlight, and they are again. Or is it okay? Well, this team is a little different. Maybe they should be winning with defense, winning with goaltending, or having their depth skaters carry them, because they are playing like a team that has more depth, but it's not showing right now. Where is, I guess, to wrap up this question, where is the blame with the Maple Leafs? Or who are we pinpointing the collapse on so far?
That's a good question. I guess it depends how Game 6 goes. If their core 4 players show up tonight and they just put the Senators to bed, then I don't think there's any issue. But if they get shut out again, then it's got to be the same play, or not shut out, even just like they score 1 goal and they lose. You got to look at these guys and just think, like, what's going on here? Like, when are they going to show up for them in the playoffs? They had good starts to the series. There's no question about that. They were a big reason why they took a 3-0 lead on the Sens, but these last 2 games, they haven't really been able to come through. So I think all the pressure is on them tonight to kind of get it done, because you definitely don't want to go to Game 7 if you're the Leafs. I just think with the history there, and the history of collapses and not getting out of the first round, I think all the pressure is going to be on them, and I think it'll be really tough. Even though it would be on home ice, I think it'd be really tough for them to win that game.
Whenever a reverse sweep like this happens, the more the series goes on, the more tense it feels for that home team. I mean, the Panthers almost got reverse swept, but they stepped up at home, so you could say the Maple Leafs, if they go back home. I mean, Game 6 tonight in Ottawa, they're going to feel like if they get ahead early, they're going to be ready to erupt. They're going to feel like, okay, we really are coming back, and the crowd's going to get into it. It's one of those feelings where you see this, the writing on the wall, you feel the sign, you feel the warning signs coming, and Ottawa's going to come into that game knowing, okay, we can really, if we get ahead early and we build on this, we're going into Game 7 where it's going to be tense. It is going to be, they're going to feel all the pressure, have everything to lose. And this, a reverse sweep, this could be the worst of the reverse sweeps, just because the way we were talking about the Maple Leafs, the way we've been talking about them all season, saying this is a different team, and this team is built different. And if they blow this one, I mean, we might have to put them on a no-flight list. Like, every time any podcast happens, we're just going to say, like, we don't believe them. We're not talking about them yet until they prove us otherwise. Like, I don't know. Like, hopefully they win Game 6, because we need to talk about the Maple Leafs. They're a big market. They pay our bills. But enough of that. Let's shift gears a bit. And there's a few teams that have been eliminated. I think last night and Tuesday night we saw a few teams that are eliminated. And on the note of the glass half empty, glass half full, there's 3 teams that we'll kind of quickly try to touch on them a bit, but there's the Devils, the Lightning, and the Canadiens. Well, I guess we'll start with the Devils, and we'll say, I'm wondering, this is really how do we view them, but are you thinking glass? There's 2 ways to look at the Devils, where you say glass half empty, glass empty, where either you could say, okay, they weren't healthy, they were banged up before the playoffs started. This is an injury-plagued team that we didn't see the best version of the Devils in the playoffs. They'll be back next year. They have a good core locked up for the future. They'll be fine. They'll be a playoff team for years to come. Or you can look at this team and say, I am genuinely concerned. I actually, on one of our early podcasts, said I am a little concerned with how they are built. I think I've been a little concerned how they're built for a while, just in terms of like the roster, the roster, like what your star power looks like, what your core looks like is a little concerning. So I'll ask you, are you looking at this glass half empty, glass half full, where you look at the Devils and say, okay, we could write this off? Or B, where you're concerned, I think one of the big things is you look at injuries, where obviously say injuries are an oddity and like, okay, they're a fluke and you can write them off for 1 year, but this is not the first year that they've been injured. And this is not the first year we've seen a team that has dealt with, a Devils team that's dealt with this. So I wonder, how do we view this team now? Where they're out in the first round. They're out in the first round. They're again, they feel like that second tier in the Metropolitan Division. And how do we view them?
So I think their core is fine. Like Timo Meier, Jesper Bratt, and Nico Hischier, they all showed up against the Carolina Hurricanes. That's not really the concern with the core is Jack Hughes staying healthy. Like he's got to stay on the ice. He's played only 62 games in each of the last 2 seasons, so they go as far as he goes because he's one of the best players in the NHL. He was a top 5, top 10 center in the NHL this season before he got hurt. So losing him is obviously a huge blow. So they really need him to figure out how to stay healthy because as we saw in the playoffs, they just don't have the depth right now to compete with some of these better teams. Like that's the biggest concern for me is just outside of their core 4 players, the supporting cast is really just not where it needs to be at all. And I think that's where this is a huge offseason for them. This is where they need to improve the most is getting more support around these guys.
Where's the physicality, though, coming from in the top 6? Where is that two-way play? Nico Hischier is a great two-way center. He's actually one of the better ones in the league. But where is that physical forechecking presence? That presence that I think is needed in the playoffs, where you need a player like whether it's Matthew Tkachuk or Nathan MacKinnon who's got the size to make those physical plays and really do it all. Where is that player in their lineup?
For me, it has to be Timo Meier because it's just like the kind of player he is, and he did play a little bit like that in the Hurricane series. He was probably their most consistent forward, and as the series went on, he started to find the score sheet more often. But like aside from that, I guess it would be Nico Hischier. I don't understand why people think he's small. He's 6'2", like 200 pounds now. He's not like overly physical, but he's great in one-on-one battles, and he goes to dirty areas to score goals. I don't even really think they need a physical presence up there. The team's pretty physical as it is. They need more skill and goal scoring because they don't have enough of that right now, which is kind of crazy to say, but that's because their roster construction doesn't really make too much sense outside of their core 4 players. So they need to add some more skill to their lineup this offseason, and I think that's the biggest thing for them is adding more goal scoring. It's going to be interesting to see what general manager Tom Fitzgerald says when he has his exit interview sometime next week. I would think they know goal scoring is an issue for this team. It's a big reason. Until game 5, they had no points from a bottom 6 forward in that series against Carolina. So that's the biggest thing for them for sure is to get some better depth scoring, specifically in the top 9. I think they're going to need like a guy or two, a new player or 2 on the 4th line, but they really need a couple of top 9 forwards for sure.
I think it's almost goes both ways with this team because the question they've had to answer when you have 2 star players in Bratt and Hughes who have great skill, 2 are the best skilled players, they don't have that physicality. Where are we going to get that elsewhere? And they got it with Timo Meier. They have it in Nico Hischier. They have that defensive play from them too. The question is with the rest of the roster, where if you're going with those depth skaters and you're looking to add that physicality and that size, which they did, where you look at some of the moves that they've made, Eric Hollis, for example, is one of those players that maybe you could say, he actually is a player who's been scoring as well, so he does it all for them. And they traded Pavel Zacha to get him. So if you're answering that question, you're moving on from someone who is more skilled to get that two-way presence, that physicality in your lineup. And when you have this issue where you're either getting from your depth a lot of defensive play or a lot of you're getting those defensive forwards, but you're not getting the scoring, or you're getting the scoring, but you're not getting that. When you can't get both, which I think they need, that's the big thing. They need both because we've seen Devils teams in the past. This team is a little different, but we've seen Devils teams in the past that can't defend and don't have in their bottom 6 really defensive forwards. We've seen that get exposed. We've seen that team run into a team like the Hurricanes who had their number. This series was a little different where it was like the Hurricanes offense taking over in the end and the Devils couldn't keep up. So, but when you have those issues, it just becomes a headache. It becomes a headache that's hard to solve because it's hard to find those players in the offseason. It's hard to find those players at all, like depth players that do it all. There's a reason they're depth players and not top six or middle six type of players. And it gives you a lot of headaches. And it's one of those things that I think with the Devils, they'll be fine. They'll be a playoff team next season. I mean, assuming they don't have injuries, which again is not a safe assumption anymore, but they'll be a playoff team. They'll be third or second in the Metropolitan Division. The question is, you're going to face a team like the Hurricanes, or you're going to face a team, whether it's even if you make it as far as the conference finals, you're going to face a Panthers team that has these teams that do it all and have that and can do it all throughout the lineup. You have to have those answers for them. They do not have those answers, and I don't know where you're getting them. So I'm looking at this as a glass half empty kind of thing, even though I think they'll be fine in terms of making the playoffs. But it's one of those things where you just have a lot of headaches and it's hard to solve.
Yeah. I mean, they don't have a lot of cap space this offseason, which is a bit of a problem. So you're going to have to move some guys out, some contracts out. Like Andre Palat, I think it's just time to move on there. He's not the player that he used to be, and you can't really have him on the roster at $6 million a year anymore. Eric Hall is actually someone I think they should move on from this offseason too. He's entering the final year of his contract, and he did have a nice close to the season, but he was kind of invisible for 2 to 3 months of it. So It's going to be interesting to see what they do, because they need the cap space to make improvements, and they also have to get Luke Hughes signed to an extension this summer too. So I expect them to be super active, moving out some contracts, bringing in some new players, and then kind of taking care of their, some house cleaning that they need to do as well.
Yeah. What's the name? I'll shift gears. Another team that's half empty, half full. Let's talk about the Lightning a bit. And the Lightning, where do we see them? Because I think what's interesting with the Lightning is they're the one teams that, like the Devils, you're like, they'll be fine. They'll be a playoff team next season. You have Kucherov, Vasilevsky. You have these players, these superstar players, still in their primes. At the same time, I just wonder, the question is, how do you avoid becoming the Penguins? Which the Penguins, we saw what happened to them. And now they're kind of moving on where it's harder to pivot because you did put all these players into these long-term contracts. I wonder, how do you avoid becoming that? And with the Lightning, is the glass at how optimistic can you be? I mean, when you have Brandon Hagel playing the way he does, and he's a younger player who's in his prime, and he looks like one of those superstar players, and you have Jake Gensel, who's really opened up their window a bit because he's in his early 30s, so he's still got plenty of years left. I wonder, where do we see this Lightning team? Do we see them as, okay, there's maybe a little concern here about we need to move on from what we're doing, or B, that we just need to build on what – I wonder, where do you build on what you have, or do you maybe move in a different direction if you're Lightning or trying to pivot?
Yeah, I mean, their first round exit was by far the most surprising to me, because I did not expect them to lose in 5 games. I thought it was going to go to a 7th game, and I had them winning the series in 7 games. With their core players, they're not getting any younger, so every season that goes by, it's another year older for Nikita Kucherov, Vasilevsky, Victor Hedman. I mean, Braden Point is still pretty young. I think he's in his late 20s, so you still have that. But yeah, I don't know where you go here, because they made a bunch of moves, not a bunch. They got Oliver Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde in the same trade at the trade deadline, and obviously Bjorkstrand missed the series with an injury. Who knows if he could have made a difference? But they gave up some assets to do that, and it looked like they had retooled this team pretty well to make a deep run, and they weren't particularly close against Florida. Which is surprising to me. I mean, I guess Florida getting Matthew Tkachuk back, and they made their additions too. That Brad Marchand and all that, Seth Jones. It's not like they didn't do anything at the trade deadline. And after all, they did win the Eastern Conference 2 years in a row. And after that series, you got to think that they can win it for a 3rd year in a row. But yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of the Lightning. That was a shocking result for me. I wasn't expecting them to lose in 5 games, and it's going to be interesting to see how they assess things and where they go from this offseason, because they're not going to throw in the towel yet. But yeah, it does get to a point where, like, hey, maybe they are the next Pittsburgh Penguins, where they just keep losing in the first round, and eventually you fall out of it because your core just gets too old and they're not the players that they used to be.
I think the Florida Panthers are an important part of this equation, because
yeah,
the Panthers are a team that, they can win the series. They won the series in 5, and they're a team that can take care of teams, make good teams look bad, good teams look terrible. Like they made this series look one-sided. And what's interesting, I think it's a little ironic because when the Lightning were going on their runs and they made they made it to the Cup twice and won it, and then they made it to the Cup a third time and lost. In 2022, they played the Panthers and they swept the Panthers in that series. How important that series was for the Panthers, where they saw who they had to beat and realized we need to change what we are. They had a great team. They had Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar. I almost said Mackenzie Blackwood, but Mackenzie Weegar was their great two-way defenseman. Great, he still is a great defenseman. But Bill Zito saw that series and said, we need to change our identity, change who we are. And he went out and got Matthew Tkachuk. And since then, the Panthers have looked at the Lightning and said, we are making sure they're kind of the team that's like, we have to beat up on them. So maybe the Lightning, to be fair, it's a little bit of, okay, we can't play the Panthers because they just have our number and they have this feeling of we need to beat up on them. But you have to look at how you played against the Lightning and how you played and how you looked in that series and say, okay, this is the standard, or the Lightning, how they played against the Panthers, and this is the standard, and we have to figure out how to beat this team. And obviously the physicality of the series, it wasn't that they weren't ready for it. It's just as much as they couldn't go with the Panthers. The Panthers are one of those teams that it's hard to go toe to toe with them anyway. I don't know what the answer is. So I think if the question for the Lightning is whether they want to continue pushing to try to make a cup, or if they maybe want to try to pivot away from the roster, because I think when you have Kucherov, you're always going to be. You're never going to rebuild with Kucherov. And it's similar thing the Avalanche have, and it's similar thing the Penguins have. When you have a star player in their prime who's still playing at a high level, you don't rebuild, you don't retool. You have to pivot in a way that keeps you contending, but it doesn't. But you do change the way your roster looks. I mean, the Avalanche answered this question where they said we can't win with a core three or core four where four players taking up our cap space, and they pivoted away from it. Maybe the Lightning do that. One thing I will add on the Lightning is don't move on from John Cooper. That's the one thing you don't want to do. But as much as there might be rumblings now, because Mike Sullivan was just fired, so he was one of the longest tenured head coaches. John Cooper's the longest tenured head coach. You don't move away when you find a coach like that. When you find a coach like John Cooper, even if you want to say it's getting stale, which I don't think it is, you don't move on from them. We know how hard it is to find great coaching, and it's hard to find coaches that could win the playoff like John Cooper. I think that's the big thing. I think that's the one thing I'll say. Maybe you'll add to that just because of the coaching's in the news now. But what you think of? Yeah, because there are maybe some rumblings that the Lightning would want to go in a different direction or pivot away, like try to change it up a bit. But that's not the change I don't think you make.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna get rid of John Cooper, you better be going after Mike Sullivan, because you're not gonna upgrade from John Cooper unless it's someone like Mike Sullivan. So, if John Cooper and the Lightning part ways, there are gonna be teams that have coaches that will fire their coach to try to get John Cooper. So, I think that would definitely be a mistake on their part to move on from him. I think you look at the way they lost that series, and I just think you have to chalk it up to the Panthers being Eastern Conference champions the last two teams, and when healthy, they're probably still the best team in the Eastern Conference, and I think that's what it just ultimately came down to. It's not like Tampa stunk during the regular season, especially down the stretch, and after they made some of their additions, you could argue that they were maybe the second best team in the Eastern Conference. I know it didn't look that way in the playoff series that they played, but I think the Panthers are just that good, and sometimes that's just what it comes down to. And I think if they assess things that way, I think they'll be all right, and they won't make any rash decisions like getting rid of John Cooper.
Yeah, the Panthers are that team, that they're the team to beat. And I think that's the thing to keep in mind, is that if you're going to be a cup team, you have to think of how are we going to beat the Panthers? And that's going to be if they are buying in, that's a question they're going to have to answer. And they're going to have to look in the offseason for the type of players that can line you up for that. The one other team, I guess, this one's really a glass half full one, so I don't know if we really need to spend so much time on them, and that's the Montreal Canadiens, which they weren't supposed to be they weren't supposed to be in the playoffs this season anyway. They got in. You have a great top line where it's Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, and Yaroslav Slavkovsky. That trio, it works. I don't know why. It's just that the combination of the three, it works, and it's one of the best top lines in hockey now. You have Lane Hudson on defense. They're a team that you look at them, the sky is the limit. I feel like, the question is, I guess, what happens next with them. So I will ask you that, because it feels like when you get into the playoffs, you're a rebuilding team, and this is your first experience in the playoffs. You're like, the sky's the limit. Now what? And I think that's actually what I should just ask you. Like, what next happens with the Canadians? Because you can see, okay, what now the conversation is, how do we pass the Lightning? How do we pass the Panthers? How do we beat the Panthers? How do we beat these types of teams? Because we're a contender now. Now what do we do next?
They have a lot of young talent on their roster as it is, so it's just a lot of it will be taking the next steps forward in that. And next season, you'll have a full season of Ivan Demidov, which is huge. That's almost as good as adding like a top tier. I guess it could be as good as adding a top tier free agent in July. So they'll have that going for them. And he didn't really have much of an impact in the playoffs, but that's not all that surprising given his age, and he had just come over to North America a couple of days before the playoffs had started. But having Demidov for a full year is you're adding a top tier talent. It looks like Dobish is a pretty good goaltending prospect. Sam Montembeault has played well for them too. Cole Caulfield, obviously, Lane Hudson's probably going to win the Calder Trophy. So, I think you look at the young pieces that they have, and it looks like they're going to be sticking around for a while. And sometimes teams take a step back before they really take their next step forward. So, be interesting to see if they can build off this playoff appearance and make it again next season. But all the pieces are in place for them to do that. And this is definitely a glass half full kind of thing with them, because you just look at the young talent they have, and it'd be interesting to see how they decide to attack this offseason. I don't know what their cap space is like. I'm assuming because they've been rebuilding, they probably have a good amount of it. So, and I know they have a lot of good prospects and probably some draft capital to work with. So if they really want to make some moves to make this roster, to make sure that they get back in next season, they can do it, I would assume. But yeah, I think the Canadians, they're definitely a year ahead of where people expected them to be. And I think all the young talent that they have, you look at them going forward, and they're probably going to be players in the Atlantic Division for quite some time, even if it's not next season.
It's for sure the glass half full, where you see the ceiling here, and the big thing is what happens next with them, because now it's more of nitpicking the roster and saying, okay, we don't like our second line, which I think was the line Patrick Laine was on and off on, and figuring out how to maybe fix that line. But it's like, or how to fix the defense after the Lane Hudson pick. After Lane Hudson, Mike Matheson's getting older, so he might, and he's I think a free agent after next season, so you maybe have to figure out that pivot from him. But your depth defense, maybe if Montembeault is your 1B and Dobish becomes your primary starter, that saves you a headache where you don't need to worry about goaltending. But at this point, you are nitpicking the roster and saying, okay, there's some things that we need to fix, but otherwise we're going to be a great team. We're going to be one of the better teams in the conference and possibly the NHL. It's those small details. And I think it makes this offseason a big one, because you have to figure out how aggressive you're going to be. When you look at some of these teams, like the Avalanche a few years ago, or the Devils a few years ago, where once they took that leap and became one of those playoff teams where you knew they were going to be one for a while. The Avalanche, you go back to when Cale Makar came on the scene, and now you know you're going to be a great team for a while. It's how aggressive you want to be, / do you just say, we have a great core, we're going to build around it and keep calm, not do anything crazy, which I think they're going to do. I mean, as intriguing as it is maybe to make a big move and get another elite defenseman, let's say, or another top 6 scorer, and maybe trade out like Logan Mailloux, who's in Laval right now, is a great prospect for them. You trade maybe some of these depth or some of these prospects or some of these other skaters. As intriguing as it is, I think overall playing it safe, really just building with what you have, and maybe adding those minor moves now at least is what you do. And maybe you look back at the trade deadline ahead, the 2026 one, and say, okay, that's where we maybe make a big move if we're actually one of the best teams in the conference. It's really the small details, but I mean, it does make this offseason maybe not consequential, but interesting for them. I guess let's wrap up with not related to this, but we'll call it coaches. We'll talk about coaches' challenges. And I think what's interesting about this is that we've watched, I think almost every goaltender interference call that's been challenged has been As in, if they call the challenge, the team that allows the goal challenges for goaltender interference, they lose that challenge almost all the time. And pretty much all the time, I think it feels like that. And the Kings, they had their challenge that the call, I mean, that series, that call changed the series. And you could pinpoint that call as the one that changed, that allowed the Oilers to come back and possibly take over the series and possibly win it. You look at a lot of these challenges that are not getting called. Then you have the Vegas one, which actually worked out, and that changed Game 5. I wonder, I'll just ask you, I don't know the data behind it, but it's interesting because one is why if you're a coach, why throw the challenge, not throw the challenge flag, that's a football thing, but why call for a challenge? And then the other part of this is, I guess, why have them in the first place? I actually want to keep challenge. It's interesting because I think that's the question that the league has to answer of how much stuff do we want the league to review? How many plays do we want the league to review? And how many things do we want the coaches to challenge? I actually a part of me wants to keep the coaches challenged. I think one of the fascinating things about being a coach is knowing when to make the right calls, knowing who to start in net, knowing who to play where. And one of that is you have to make a call on the fly of, I want to challenge this or I want to not. So I'll ask you first of, should we even have the challenge to begin with? But then the other part to this is, should coaches even challenge stuff, or should they? Is it better to just say we'll let this play out, or not? Like just say we'll let it play out, and it's not worth it to challenge, then go on a penalty because you delayed the game or something like that.
Yeah. Well, look, usually with offside challenges, if you're challenging for offside, it's going to be correct because your video coach is buzzing down to you saying, "Hey, this is offside. Go challenge it." So you don't usually see offside challenges go to waste. Goaltender interference is the one where, that Kings challenge, I don't really know why they challenged for goaltender interference in that, because I didn't really think that was goaltender interference at all. And it obviously changed the game and kind of changed the series at this point. So offside challenge, yeah, if you're challenging for that, chances are it's getting called back because your video coach is telling you, hey, this is offsides. Goaltender interference is the one where I think it's not necessarily a subjective call, but you're definitely not guaranteed to win it if you challenge it. And I think we see some instances where some goals have been scored. And I know there was a couple in the Devils Hurricane series that I was following along with, where it's like, hey, this could be goaltender interference, but Sheldon Keefe decided not to challenge because it was just not. And Rod Brindamore had a goal like that too, where he decided not to challenge. Just because it's not a guarantee you're going to get the call to overturn. And if you miss, you go on the penalty kill. And that could really flip the series, as we saw with what happened with the Kings and Oilers. So I think goaltender interference is the one where I don't really know what the change there is. I think maybe the league needs to have more of a concrete definition to goaltender interference for these coaches to make it easier for them to challenge, because it's kind of tough. For me, I think you see some goals that they look like goaltender interference, and they go to review it, and they come back and they say there's no goaltender interference, and you're like, why? So it'll be interesting to see if something comes out of that. But yeah, offsides challenges usually not an issue. It's the goaltender interference is one that can get you into some trouble.
It's the goaltender interference one that's been an issue all season. It's been definitely a discussion all season long, and now in the playoffs we're seeing it again, where people just don't know what it is. People don't know what makes it a goaltender interference, what doesn't. And what's interesting with you mentioned the coaches Sheldon Keefe and Rod Brindamore not calling the challenges. I think calling challenges and not, it almost feels like this old school versus new school approach to whether you want to challenge something or not. Like, I could see, maybe this is because I'm getting old and becoming an old school type of person, I could see why you want to challenge something, and knowing you might lose it, knowing, let's say you have a 60% chance of losing, 40% chance of winning. I could see one of these old, like a coach who maybe, whether you want to say they use analytics or not every coach does, but it's more of whether you want to go with this old school idea of, I want to send the message to my team that I'm standing up for my team in this moment. I'm willing to take the hit of a penalty, knowing that, okay, I'm in your corner. I'm backing you guys up. And there is something maybe to that. Obviously, when you take a penalty, all the stats behind it will say you will lose this game, or you will lose. You will everything about this. You will lose because you challenge this. At the same time, you want to stand up for your team and say, I'm challenging this because I believe you guys were playing the right way, let's say, right? Or I think you guys are going to kill off this penalty type of thing. because I'll take this penalty knowing you guys didn't do anything wrong. But standing up for your players, maybe that sends a better message. When you talk about culture and coaches and setting a culture, that maybe that does something for them. I mean, then again, you look at Bridgemore and Sheldon Keefe, and they know the data behind it, saying it is not worth it. Maybe the message you're sending is not worth it by doing that, because you're taking a penalty, you're losing a game, and that might be worse for your team as a whole. Like where your team says, like, yeah, we lost the game because our coach maybe our coach threw us under the bus, and maybe that's what maybe that's how they view it. I mean, it's one of those things that make it kind of what I like about it, the challenge is it really does put the spotlight on the head coach. And there are very few times where you can look at the head coach and say the decisions they make, how important they are, but they are important. And we've seen in the playoffs, and coaches challengers is another example of that. And where the decisions they make, it's like they decide that they can decide games, and they really make a difference, and they set the standard for their team, or they set the culture for their team, or really make a difference in these games. And I think it's one of the fascinating parts within the game, which is, I guess, why I want to keep them and not just have everything go to review, maybe.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I wouldn't get rid of coaches challenges either. I know, like, there's been, I think it was on the last 32 Thoughts episode that there was like maybe they should go to like some NFL kind of style rules for challenges where like they have like a video room, especially on scoring plays, where like the I guess Toronto would buzz down on the scoring play, like, hey, we need to take a look at this. Maybe that would help, but that'll also take away from the coaches challenge a little bit. So be interesting to see if that's something they decide to change at some point in the future.
I mean, if they wanted to change it, I guess the one thing to add would be make instant replay instant, and don't make it one of these things that takes like a long time to review where everyone's just sitting around. I mean, that's the big thing with hockey. As much as I think when you look at the way football is broadcasted and played, there's this feeling of we love the anticipation. We love the build up towards a call and showing it on replay again. You have the same thing in basketball where when there's a call, they keep replaying it time and time again. And at the same time, that's frustrating fans, and that's frustrating. It's frustrating, and hockey does not want to have that frustration. I don't think they do. So that's the thing. If you are going to have reviews that go to the booth or go to Toronto, go to the studios, you want it to be quick. And I think that's the big thing. All right. I guess that's all we got. Thank you, Alex, for joining. I know this is an odd setting to be in. I'm in the middle of Pennsylvania now, and hopefully this actually comes out well, because we'll find out afterwards.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
A pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for tuned in. That's all we got for now. We hope you liked this episode. If you did, please like, comment, share, subscribe on YouTube. Give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. It would mean a lot to us. If you like this episode, and give us a good review on Apple Podcasts, that would mean a lot. If you didn't like this episode, again, as I say, I don't know how you made it this far. You probably didn't, especially because I'm in the middle of the state of Pennsylvania, and probably don't have great Wi-Fi now. But so it goes. But it would mean a lot to us. Make sure to check out all our great work at the Hockey Writers Substack, which comes out as well every morning. We have great content there, exclusive content there. It's the playoffs, and it's that time of year where a lot is going on. We got the playoffs, we've got head coaching rumors and head coaching. The carousel is going on where maybe Rick Tocchet goes to Pittsburgh and Mike Sullivan goes to Vancouver. Who knows? But it's all up in the air. It's exciting time of year with all the off-season stuff starting to come into fold, and the drafts around the corner. So we got a lot of draft content. It's an exciting time of year. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. Check out all our great work, and tune in next time for another great episode. Thank you.